CEO Wisdom pod with Freddie Paxton. He is CEO at WOAW, WOAW. We've been talking pre-pod as we usually do. Pretty fluent conversation, I must say. I and Fred have traveled extensively, so that's always a good sign. We're both young. Fred's 2 years younger than I am. Very young guy, very successful. So I'm always excited to speak about folks that have different backgrounds. So Fred, can you introduce yourself real quick and tell us about what you're working on nowadays?
Yeah, so as you said, I'm Freddie or Fred. I'm the CEO of WOAW. We are the UK's leading personal branding agency for founders, CEOs, entrepreneurs. So we were one of the first companies in this space specifically to focus on that niche of people. And essentially our job is to build and scale reputations for these people online that they can mobilize for whatever needs that they have. So we're really lucky to work with some of the UK's and internationally some of the most successful people to help them build their audiences. And that's obviously a great learning experience for me and the team. So we work with some people that are public figures. So they're the investors that you see on TV and shows like Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, as we call it in the UK, all the way through to, smaller earlier stage entrepreneurs, I should say, who are running really cool, successful, progressive businesses. And we're in charge of helping them build and scale their audiences to achieve whatever goals they have, in a nutshell. So that's what we do. That's what we're the best at.
Love it. So when you refer to Shark Tank, are you talking about, I'll use my British accent here, Mr. Bartlett?
No, not him specifically, but no. So
he's great. No, it's like his pod is cool. I think he's doing a great job.
Yeah, so we work with a number of the investors from the UK version of the show, so Dragon's Den. So we have in the past worked with a guy called James Khan, who is super successful, has tons of followers online, and largely attributed to us. But also one of our current clients is a guy called Tej Lalvani, who is happy for us to speak publicly about that because he's given us a testimonial. So these are some of the UK's most successful high net worth people, and they trust us to manage their reputation and build their reputation.
Very cool. I'll ask you kindly for an introduction to have them on my pod. I've been on Dragon's Den myself, not as an investor, but as a candidate, or however you call it, the Canadian version, right? The Quebecois version, to be precise. Was a hell of an experience, like a lot of jitters in the backstage. We were the last to pass that day, so there was like 5-6 people, so we had the whole time to practice. But yeah, once you get on the set, and you walk, man, the jitters go to an all-time high.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It was somewhat of a cool experience. I'm looking at your LinkedIn here. It seems to me, Fred, that you knew where you wanted to go in life quite early. Am I right in saying that?
Oh, it's flattering, but it often felt at times like I didn't know what I wanted to do, and there was some chaos. I mean, I went to university and did a degree that I didn't particularly love, but I was young and I was stubborn and I just tried to stick it out, and that didn't work for me. So I quit, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I was very lucky to be living at home with my family, and my mum supported my decision to drop out of uni, but she was like, you need to do something. So then it got me thinking, what do I enjoy? Sports, big football fan, big Arsenal fan, and journalism. I'm good writing with words and things like that. So then I combined the two essentially, and that's what led me on to do some work experience and start freelancing in the journalism world. And then, to tell you the truth, I'm sure we'll cover it a little bit more, but the money was crap, and I didn't want to continue in that world full time. So I kept that up as more of a passion project and thought quite carefully about how I could use the skills that I had, but branch out and do different things, which has ultimately led me to what I'm doing now.
Right. Most modern journalists, I don't like, they're either egotistic or, they expose people quite a lot. They're kind of win-lose people. They don't have a good reputation nowadays, especially with big media. I don't think you're one of those because you're like the younger generation. And I do think these are folks that have been in the industry quite a while. They're kind of burning out. They're not feeling well, and that reflects in their articles. Although, yes, I will appreciate the editorial style of most. I really enjoyed reading some of these exposés right now, not as a hater, for example, in the business world when they expose like ex-CEO, but yeah, it's like it's good data and it gives you the opportunity to think for yourself. The only problem with that, and I think we'll get into that later on in the interview, is that most people cannot think for themselves, and most journalists are good at persuasion. And yeah, when you persuade someone that's persuadable, if that's even a word, you kind of play with their mind and you decide of the fate of humanity, which is kind of risky. So I think it should come with asterisks. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent here, but the point that I want to get into is that you have a background as a journalist. You've interviewed a lot of folks. My first question is, how do you get folks comfortable to share nuggets of wisdom? How do you extract this first matter out of people and make it available to wider audiences as a journalist? What are your techniques?
Yeah, well, I think there's two parts to it. So for me, I was a young journalist. I was 21, and I was trying to approach some of the world's most the most successful footballers, the best known footballers, agents. And sometimes the last thing that they want to do is talk to a journalist because of some of the reasons that you just mentioned. So, I mean, part of it is just remembering that they're human. And if you can find a way to connect to them on sort of a personal level by referencing something that is important to them through the research that you've done, or just feeling like you can build some rapport as a human first, and not that you're just asking them for something. I think that, and I had a conversation with somebody else about this today, and I think that's really important. And then in terms of making them feel comfortable, I think a lot of the time it's like, you don't want to ask people questions and for it to become a Q&A. It needs to be more of a collaborative discussion where you're providing some of your own insight into things as well, and you're bouncing comments back and forth, rather than just like, here's my question, here's an answer, here's another question. It becomes a discussion. And when they feel comfortable and that they can sort of relate to you in some way, and sometimes you can't achieve that, and sometimes it just doesn't quite click. But often, if you look to do it in that way, you can find common ground, you can build rapport, and then it just becomes like talking to anybody that you might have a bit of common ground with, and they are just people. So that was always my approach.
I started this pod not so long ago, and one of the lessons that I understood from talking to legends and very successful people is that they're human. Like you said, like they are human, literally. Obviously, they're superhumans in some fields, field, right? But in most fields, they are humans. I want to ask you if you've spoken with these various highly successful folks and highly paid folks, because I did watch the All or Nothing series on Prime, and it did follow Chelsea, if I'm not mistaken, and Arsenal. And man, do these guys have high salaries. I think some of them, they make like 20 mil a year. Some of them signed $200 million contracts like Ronaldo and Messi. And I really became a fan of football, like Europeans call it, which is the real way to call it. What have you learned from these highly and hugely successful folks?
That money is a big problem for a lot of people, because it's quite scary. Sometimes these guys are 21, 22, and they're being paid £300,000 a week to play football, and it can influence people negatively. But I've also learned that not to be, because I remember obviously being young and approaching these people, it was almost quite intimidating. I'm from a completely different I guess I'm from a similar background to some of them where they started out, but then once they become mega rich, it's like it becomes harder to relate to them. But ultimately you're able to sort of, if you're able to connect to them again on a human level, and speak to the person that they are / were, regardless of the money, because they all started from nothing, most of these footballers, then you can have good conversations with them. And I think it's interesting as well, speaking to people that have a lot of money, because their perspectives on things are really interesting a lot of the time, in terms of how people treat them differently, the opportunities that come to them just because they're seen as somebody who has money, but also the negative side of it as well, in terms of having to be so careful about people wanting to use you and things like that. And it really sort of opened my eyes to a world that I never understood and never had access to before. And I think there was some important learnings within that for me.
Just imagine the pressure of, I can get injured and lose all of this, from someone that came out of nothing. The deep psychological fears that I would highly recommend these folks to be followed by a therapist or a coach, because
Mm.
it's like, it's literally all or nothing. It's a good name of how to describe that. If they get injured or just if they don't perform, right? So they're under huge pressure, these folks. That's one. Two, yes, the cash is huge. They cracked it almost from week one. 300K pounds a week. 300K pounds a week. I mean, that's what people get in a lifetime in most countries, in a week. So they cracked that code. But yeah, the relationship code, right, with their wife, they're under huge mental stress. They need to be there at home with their child, what about their families and friends? Now friends are asking for money. How do you
Exactly.
react to that?
Yeah, it happens all the time, and people often they realize that some of the people that they considered their closest friends, their closest allies, are actually using them. That happens a lot to footballers, and it's sad, and it means they have to live a very particular type of life. And you mentioned as well, there's a huge inherent pressure with the fact that obviously if their body gives up on them, which it's a physical sport and it can happen, and it does happen to everybody at some point, that's your career over. And football in general is a short career. You most of them don't start playing at the top level, even if they're really a young professional at sort of like 18 to 20, they get their big break, and then it's up until sort of 30. So they've got a 10-year window. And that's it. So people have to think really carefully about, okay, what do I want to do with my life beyond football? Which is something that we can help people with in what we do at WOAW. It's like, okay, how can I future proof? How can I pivot from one thing to another? How can I build an audience that stays with me, not just while I'm a footballer or while I'm a X or Y or a CEO, but what about afterwards? What can I do in the future?
So you'll want to listen to my pod that I published yesterday. It was a wealth manager for athletes in the US. So he's dealing with a lot of NBA players, NFL players, and so forth. So we had this exact discussion, which is an interesting one because CEOs want to be athletes. Athletes want to be CEOs. That's an interesting pattern at play here. The last thing I want to mention on that topic is that you don't have really a personal private life, right? You go out to the restaurant, everyone is looking at you, everyone wants your autograph. So, but yeah, it's mostly worth it, right? For the money that you can reinvest in various fields of your life, I think. Sometimes I catch myself, as a CEO, I'm competing against them, well, competing, quote unquote. I'm also cooperating, but I want to make as much and way more than they do. Which is humongous, right? Like these folks will have like $1 billion net worth at the end of their lives. Have you found yourself in that mindset as a CEO? Do you intend to make that? Because how can I ask it how can I ask this question in an interesting way? Like me, I want to make a fortune. I do think that money and power can be used for good. But sometimes I guess that most CEOs, when they look at the salaries of these athletes, are like, how the fuck will I compete?
Yeah, it's all about perspective, right? I think I try not to compare, and I know it's maybe a bit of a cliche answer, but I try not to compare myself to other people too much, because I feel like there's always going to be someone that you can look at and it's just, they've got an unobtainable level of wealth. And it's like, what's even the point if you're gonna strive to be the best constantly in terms of like, okay, I'm gonna one up this person, I'm gonna one up that person. You're never ever going to achieve that, because there will always be someone that has got more, who's been more successful, quote unquote. But I would also be lying if I didn't, if one of the things that if I said that one of the things that motivate me wasn't money. Of course it is. I want to be successful. I want to be rich, whatever that means. And a lot of that comes from the fact that, I certainly didn't come from poverty, and it would be unfair for me to make out like I did. And I wouldn't want to do that, but I definitely didn't come from money either. So for somebody like me, yeah, obviously it's important. It's a big driving force to be able to look back in 20 years and be like, I'm in the same bracket now as people that I consider really successful and really wealthy because of the work that I've put in. That definitely motivates me for sure.
Yeah, rich being like free, have your own independence and not being susceptible to the forces of money and the stresses of money, this capitalist world that was imposed on us. I found a better way to ask that question, although I don't want to stick there forever, but it's okay. Charles now is focusing on building his empire of businesses. I'm 29 now. Should I just become a professional UFC athlete right now? It would take me 2 years to probably get there. And then what would be the payday, or should I just choose this new different sport? I mean, football, there's tons of competition. I don't think I would have any rational chance at, and I really suck at football. Let me mention that and be clear with that. But that would be the equation and the real question that goes through my mind. Or, it's always fun to revisit your past and be like, oh, in another life, I'd be this professional athlete or this Navy SEAL. And then is that the future I want for my children? Should I teach them sport and teach them the value of that, and maybe help them if that's a career that they want to pursue? Those would be the better questions, I guess.
Yeah, well, I think it's a case of just weighing up what it is that you really think you're going to get the most fulfillment from, and not maybe focusing on the money so much. Well, if money is going to be the biggest thing that fulfills you, then okay, which one is going to earn me the most money? But it's about looking at, sometimes it's worth taking a step back and being like, okay, am I happy with what I've got in my life? If I change direction, would that make me happier? Do I think that's achievable? Is it going to put other people at a detriment if I start pursuing that? And you weigh those things up, and if you feel like, no, there's something that I want to do, and if I don't do it, I'm going to regret it in 15 years when I look back and think I wish I'd given that a try. There's no, especially at the age that you're at, and that I'm at as well. It's like, take risks. It's the time to do it, right? Take risks and do things that you feel are going to, pay off for you.
100%. Yeah, moonshots is often a question that's into my mind. Like, I'm very near to start another moonshot. My first moonshot, arguably, it's not really a moonshot, but it was my nootropic business, and it failed. That's the one that we went on TV with. Left a big hole in my wallet, and somewhat left this attraction for taking moonshots. But that's the point of moonshots, Nowadays, I'm very much of a statistics guy as well. So I'm like, is it like about taking 10 moonshots? Maybe one will succeed. And if so, 10 moonshots take a lot of time and energy and bandwidth. So I need to start today. But my thesis is a bit more conservative. It's building this agency ecosystem, right? So you have your branding agency. I have an SDR as a service agency. I have a recruitment agency. Each has a CEO, like yourself, by the way, which is my very next question. And with this cash cow, fund my moonshots, because I don't necessarily want to take external capital, although I will test out these theses next few years. The question is, how did you get to the CEO position? That's quite impressive. The founder of the business must have trusted you quite a lot. I have my own COOs and CEOs, and the degree of trust needs to be humongous. And in my case, it's even a friend that I have known in Hong Kong from a service exchange 7 to 8 years ago. So how did you get there?
Sure. So I came across the job here at WOAW in the pandemic, and I joined as an account manager. So my job was to be the first point of contact for some of our clients. And I was the third employee. So I was able to really, I was lucky to have a boss, the founder, Joe, who was really receptive to ideas. I felt like I had a lot of ideas on how we could grow. And so we grew from 3 people to around 20 people and lots of clients, and more than $1 million recurring revenue annually very quickly. And then when Joe decided that as a 27-year-old entrepreneur, he also wanted to change direction, or 26, he wanted to change direction, maybe explore some new things and think he'd been running this business for his whole 20s. He wanted to maybe try something different, felt like he'd given the business everything that he could. So he offered me the chance, knowing that obviously I knew the business and that hopefully that I'd proven myself over the time that I'd been here. He said, Fred, would you be interested in taking this on? Because I feel like you could do a great job. And I of course, I did give it some thought, obviously, but of course I said yes. It would have been crazy not to. And I'm super happy to be doing it, because it's a business that I know, that I genuinely believe in the effectiveness of. And it's a business that obviously I've grown a real affinity to. So to have come from, and also the amount that I've progressed personally, professionally over the last couple of years of being here is crazy. The growth's been crazy for me. So it's been a real journey, and I'm loving the challenge.
Congrats, dude. Huge accomplishment. And yeah, like I said, that I mean, I do these things myself. I promote CEOs to the head of my business, and they really need to prove themselves. So I'm pretty sure you did. First, quick question: how is it with the 3 or 4 months in and in that position? Like, how are you doing? Is it sinking? Is it swimming?
It's hard. Look, so right now is a really challenging economic climate for agencies, especially. So that's one challenge. And obviously there were not just the external challenges that every business faces in terms of bringing in new clients, etc., but it's also making sure that we're doing things better internally. We're making sure that our current clients are getting the best service because, you know, we're being as efficient as we can internally. So there's the internal and the external challenges, and obviously it's a fairly new thing for me. You know, in the past, I've been instrumental in the growth of the business, yes, but I always had a boss who would kind of direct things and would hold me accountable. Whereas now, you know, I'm tasked, and like most entrepreneurs are, and you'll know what this is like. I'm tasked with keeping myself accountable. You know, if I don't wake up on time, there's no one that's going to say to me, "Where are you?" So you know, I guess for some people it would be very easy when you're not feeling motivated to let your standards slip a little bit, and you're not as harsh with yourself as you need to be. So I'm really working hard to hold myself accountable. I'm working hard also to try and not let work consume me, because it's easier now more than ever for me to constantly be thinking about where the next client is coming from, or like, oh yeah, how can we make this idea happen? Because I'm so passionate about what we do. So that's a challenge as well, is taking the time to recharge so that I can then give it everything, you know, when I should be giving it everything. But to answer your question in a very simple way, the first few months, yeah, obviously been a bit of a roller coaster, but it's been incredibly enjoyable, very rewarding, and I feel increasingly comfortable day by day.
I have 3 rapid fire questions in 3 minutes. One, how can I recruit CEOs like you in my company?
How can you recruit them? Well, in my case, obviously, as you know, I rose through the ranks. So yeah.
Can I recruit them straight up? You know, is that like a scalable things? Me, I'm all about scale.
I think so. I think so. And especially if you're looking for other young, ambitious people who could potentially come in with fresh ideas and be, you know, be a lease of life for a company, why not? And also, if they're younger and less experienced, you can get them cheaper as well, because it's the opportunity payoff for them is really high. So if you feel like someone's capable and you want to give somebody a chance, then yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Second question, which is directly related to that. How much should I pay them? Should I give you shares? Should we rev share and then a salary on top of that?
Well, I think a lot of CEOs in general are incentivized by bonuses, right? So you could always tie somebody's earnings. You can give them a base salary, which is attractive and that meets their sort of demands and that's reasonable, but also a bonus, for example, that is tied directly to the growth in revenue that they can achieve, right? That's what they're there to do. So if they hit a certain target, then here's your incentive, and go and prove to me that you can do it.
If you know any young people, just refer me someone real quick. The third and last question. So it's the same question applied to the CEOs that you've worked with, the Dragon's Den people, which obviously are really successful. We covered the sport industry, but what lessons did you learn from speaking to these top folks?
That there's never a right time. It's easy to constantly delay things because you're waiting till you're in a better position, till you've got a bit more money saved, till you're more comfortable, whatever. But that time's never going to come. And if you don't throw yourself into things, you'll eventually get to a stage where you realize you've not achieved what you wanted and you'll regret it. So that's a big one. And something it's to do with iteration. So one of our clients always says, if it's not broke, still fix it. So don't just assume that just because things are going well, that they will always go well. You need to constantly be thinking about how can we improve from this point? And when things are going well, actually, that's the best time to make improvements, because you're in a positive space and you're not trying to scramble and recover things. You can launch from that. So that's a good learning.
1% better daily momentum and snowball effect compounding is life. Basically, that's how you get better.
Yes.
Fred, thank you so much. Really insightful interview. Hope you liked it too. Where can people find out more about you and WOAW?
Yeah, so best places, if you come to visit my LinkedIn profile, Freddie Paxton. I post a lot on there about what we're doing at WOAW. Obviously, we have a website as well, but you can find it all through my LinkedIn. If you like sport, then type Freddie Paxton into Twitter and you'll find me there as well.
Love it, dude.